Hello and welcome to the Family Agency Leadership Academy, meaningful partnerships between agencies and families discussion. Join a diverse group of family leaders and child welfare agency staff as they discuss the importance of creating and maintaining authentic partnerships, some potential barriers and challenges to doing so, and how to address them as they arise.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tony Parsons. I am the Young Adult Consultant with the Capacity Building Center for States, and I have the pleasure of serving as the moderator for today's discussions. Today, I'm joined by some amazing individuals and experts in their respective fields of child welfare, and I'd like to take a second to allow them to introduce themselves before we get started today. So I'll turn it over to my distinguished panelists.
Hello, I'm Katie Bergalt, and I am the Executive Director of the Office of Family Voice at the New Jersey Department of Children and Families.
Good afternoon. This is Latrice Lepore, and I am the State Foster Care Manager for the Louisiana Department of Children and Family Services.
Good morning, everyone. I am Kayla Sampson, and I am a parent partner with Epic Ohana in the islands of Hawaii.
Hello, everyone. I am Geraldo Polarski. I'm a consultant with the center, and I also serve as administrator with the Division for Children, Youth, and Families, our parent partner program.
Hello, everyone. My name is Eddie Torres. I am a birth parent with lived experience. I am in Manchester, New Hampshire, and I am part of the parent partner program within DCYF, as well as a parent leader.
Fantastic. So now that we're all acquainted with one another, let's hop right into today's discussions. We want to understand why are authentic partnerships so important, and what are some of the key aspects to creating those partnerships? Katie, I want to start with you. What are some of the benefits and some of the barriers to developing authentic partnerships in child welfare?
Thanks, Tony. I think some of the benefits are in some ways maybe obvious, but they take work, right? I think the benefit is that really partnering together, co-designing with parents, with youth, bringing together them with agency staff is really the only way that we're going to find the best solutions to meet the needs of families, right? Those who've experienced the system, who are living their everyday lives, have been impacted by the system, need to seek services, or are involved with child welfare systems, really have the answers. So I think that's one of the biggest benefits. I think really it requires us developing real relationships to get to authentic partnerships. And there's a parallel process there, right? Like there's a lot of experience that folks have in coming together with families, staff coming together with families in the work of cases, in the direct work to support families. And we can bring that to the work that we're doing to improve systems and to change programs and to create services that really truly meet the needs of families as defined by them.
Awesome. I couldn't agree more. I mean, this notion of like, as they define it is so critically important because it doesn't do anyone any good if we decide how this is going to look without their complete buy-in. Latrice, I want to tag you in here because I know you also had some great thoughts on that.
Yes, authentic family engagement is really important to shift the narrative from state agencies telling families what to do versus families being able to tell us what they need from us. We're ultimately here to serve the families, and we need to be able to provide them with a voice to explain how they got to where they are and how the agency can best help them.
Exactly. I mean, exactly. We've got to figure out how we can best help them. And I think we need to even take it a step back. So I'm curious, why is it important that we even do that level of engagement with families, especially with diverse experiences, right? What we want to be careful of is this idea of the single story. We know that families are all different and they look different and they believe different things. And so, Kayla, I really want to tag you in here. Why is it so important that when we're doing engagement, we're doing it with a full spectrum of perspectives, ideas, different sorts of family structures? Why is that level of engagement so important?
Yeah, having a diverse or different engagement with different families, I think is important because not everybody's story is the same, right? Everybody has different needs. Everybody has different struggles that they're dealing with. And so it kind of depends on where you're servicing families. If you're going to service families within communities that are low in poverty, you're going to see the higher rates of the needs in the different diversities, right? And so
you kind of touched on a really important point, though, that I do want to explore a little more is, how do child welfare agencies really begin to do that partnering, right? Like, what are some of those steps you would need to take to even begin this work? And so, Geraldo, I'm very familiar with your work in New Hampshire to do some of that great work. So I'd love to touch on what that looks like for you. How do we even begin this work from an agency's perspective?
Thank you, Tony. From my perspective, the first thing that we need to do is create those safe spaces for parents and staff to come together and begin to recognize each other's humanity, connect at a deeper level, engage in real conversations, right? And so to me, that's like the first step. So how do we do that? Like, how do we create those safe spaces? We got to look for a methodology, right? And I think that our Family Agency Leadership Academy, it's just a perfect example of a methodology that can support states and jurisdictions in bringing people, but with some intentionality, with a curriculum, and with specific activities. It has to be experiential. Nobody can make someone else feel safe by lecturing over them, right? We need to really recover the importance of what I would call the relational paths. And I think this has been validated by implementation science and a lot of that good stuff. The second step for me is creating a robust infrastructure. I think we have to really be investing. We have to be intentional. We have to be thinking about family leaders, lived experience integration now in a new way, in a way that really honors the families and the staff and community partners, and identifying what that infrastructure could look like for your state and jurisdiction, and then invest, right? So thinking about this from a capacity building approach. What are those dimensions of capacity? What do we need to have in place in terms of policies, in terms of funding to compensate family leaders? But those are just some of the things that we really need to kind of be thinking about.
Yeah, no, Gerardo, I love that. I mean, really what you're speaking to is this intentionality behind it. When you mentioned that, right? This isn't going to be something that can happen by accident. There has to be a very dedicated desire to do this work, and it's hard work, but it's important work. And so, Latrice, I also want to bring you in on this. I mean, from your perspective, what are some of the first things an agency should be doing to engage with families in this way?
So it's really important that we also implement our policy into our practice and meet families where they are, inviting families to definitely hold meetings in the area that they feel important at a time that is convenient for them. And most importantly, listening to what's important for them and their family. While, many times child welfare may put families in different categories, but then understanding their own cultural values is really important, and what's important for them and their family, and where they see their family in the future and how we can help them get there.
I really vibe with the meet them where they are, right? And not just physically, but like even emotionally, even cognitively, right? We really need to put the impetus on us as child welfare leaders and agencies to say we are going to meet this need in whatever way we need to meet that need, because everyone is different. Every family looks different, and their needs and their capabilities and capacities are all going to be different, and we have to understand that. And Kayla, I really want to circle back to you. I mean, you probably know better than anyone what it's like to have to engage with such diverse perspectives. And so why is that really important that we even take such a broad view of this work?
Thank you. And I think Latrice kind of touched upon it. We talk about the different diversities. Every family has different cultures. Every family has different beliefs. And so respecting that everybody comes from different, upbringings, that everybody's communities are different, the needs are different in different communities.
Definitely. I mean, it's really this notion of we need to respect those differences. I think that when we do child welfare, especially if we look at policy level, we look at agency level, whatever level you want to take it, we really tried to do this one size fits all, right? And I think we now know with decades of experience and decades of data and research tells us that one size definitely doesn't fit all, and it shouldn't. And so it's really important that we are recognizing those differences, but also valuing those, right? I mean, we can learn so much by approaching children, youth, and families as their authentic selves and creating those authentic partnerships, things that we could never put into a policy if we didn't have firsthand experience of understanding those families. And so I really appreciate that, especially in a time where family structure looks completely different than it did 30-ish years ago when I was born. It's only going to continue to evolve. And so we need to be cognizant of that. And this has been a rich discussion, but I do want to move us on just a little bit here into talking about meaningful partnerships between family agencies. So very related, but slightly different. And so really, I'm curious to know about, what does meaningful engagement with parents, young people, caregivers, right? All of the people kind of involved in this spectrum. What does that look like? And what actually needs to be in place from an infrastructural or policy or a leadership level to make sure that work gets done and gets done well? Latrice, you have a lot of experience with that, so I really want to go to you on that.
So a lot of times, in order to start engagement, is often when a family is coming to us to ask questions. They may have some conflicts in their family, and they just want to seek some primary advice. And there is where you begin to develop authentic relationships, where families feel safe to just ask questions, and not feel like they're being judged. And when they do encounter problems, they are able to come to the agency in order to seek help. It also is helpful that we have authentic engagement so that our community partners will feel safe referring families to us to get preventive services, and also feel comfortable making reports and coming to us for assistance. We do a lot of preventive care and community supports to prevent children from entering foster care. And that information, I think, is really important for us to make sure that health units and WIC offices and schools are really aware of, so that way we feel like we are helping the community and not always waiting for families to fail in order to help them.
Preach. I mean, you said so many things that just like resonate in my heart around like we need to get to a place where families feel safe to ask for help, right? Like we've grown up and we've experienced, we've worked in a child welfare system that makes families feel less than when they're asking for help. And we've got to get past that. You know, there's no shame in asking for help, right? There's no weakness in asking for help. And unfortunately, we've created a system where it feels like, oh, if I ask for help, they're going to penalize me. If I ask for help, they're going to want to take my child away. If they ask for help, X negative bad thing is going to happen to you. And I think we need to get to a place where we recognize and reform realistically child welfare agencies to become this bastion of hope, this bastion of support. With the advent of Family First, we've definitely made a lot of strides to get there. And I think we still have a ways to go without a doubt. But that's why we're having conversations like this, right? How do we start changing that narrative? So, Latrice, I really appreciate that point. And then Katie, I also know that you also kind of do a lot of work in that space as well. So I'd love to get your perspectives on, what needs to be in place to really have that meaningful engagement.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. So I definitely like to think about meaningful engagement as like authentic engagement, and how do you build really authentic engagement? And I've heard others kind of speak to it today, as far as meeting families where they are, and how do you build trust? And I think that that's so critical. Like, how do you build psychological safety, right? Like within the spaces where you're coming together with families. I think there's a lot to talk about in terms of infrastructure, but the foundation for the infrastructure is the commitment from leadership, right? First and foremost, and the commitment from leadership to listen to families, like genuinely, without trying to make an excuse or try to like fix, right? Sometimes it's coming from a really place of good intent. Like, I'm going to listen to what the experience of this family was, and I want to explain to them like what happened or something like that. But listening without any of that, right? Like listening without trying to fix or come up with a reason why something may have happened, just listening, right? And then figuring out how to use that information in partnership with them, right, to come up with what could look different in the future. You have to have a foundation to do that. You have to have infrastructure. So you really do have to have a way that resources have been dedicated to this work. I think I heard Geraldo speak to it. Resources in terms of compensation, right? Resources in terms of staffing, to support the work, right? To do the great thinking about like, how do we make this meeting where we're having families come together? How do we make it safe for them? And so you have to have those resources in place. You have to have like dedicated roles, right? That have support, training. So how do we support staff, right? Some of whom have lived experience. How do we support them too in doing this really hard work where we're trying to listen to families in a different way to change systems? So those are some of the key things, I think, for me.
No, I love that. I mean, this notion of just listening to hear and not listening to respond. I think as human beings, like just removed from child welfare in general, we listen so we have something to say next. We don't listen authentically to then actually do something. And I think we've all been in the child welfare space long enough to know that a lot of times when we do the listening, it's very one note. It's very superficial. And we don't act on what we've heard because it didn't jive with what we thought we were going to hear, or they said something we didn't want to hear, right? I'd love to turn over to Geraldo. I know you've been in that situation where you've had to work with an agency and people have said some big words, some big feelings came out, and they didn't want to hear it, but they still made it happen.
creating meaningful engagement is like the foundation of child welfare, right? Like for us to do right by the kids, young people, and families, we really need to invest on that, as has been said already. And for us, really, it was bringing families and young people and agency staff, as well as community partners, to actually define what that engagement was going to look like. I mentioned creating that safe space, going through the healing process that families, leaders, and young people need to. They may be very angry with what happened to them, and you have to figure a process. And in New Hampshire, we have like a 2 days, very intensive, and it's just extraordinary to see a parent that walks in and they are, they're very angry, and we start there, and we create a space to hold that and to honor that, and then by the end of the second day, they're ready to really commit to a journey as partner, as colleagues. So there are processes, there are ways. I think that once we will have a group that is consistently coming together and it's really engaging at that deep level, then looking at what is it that we mean? What is our vision for through engagement? What is that compelling vision? What this is going to look like at the practice level, at the service level, at the systems level, right? In integrating that lived experience, what would that look like? And I think one of the things that I heard that was really powerful from our family leaders was that their experience up to then had been a negative experience of engagement. And they really wanted a positive engagement, an engagement that honored their dignity, their humanity, and that allowed them to bring their gifts, their expertise, their knowledge. And to me, that's where you really want to start. And for us, once we understood this enormous power of family voice and lived experience and that authentic partnership, we then moved real quickly to say, we don't want to just have a small group of parents and then be happy and say, we've done this, a checkbox, right? We want family leader recruitment to be part of that day to day and really work with all our colleagues at the field level, anybody working directly with families, to say, you are a family voice champion, you are a lived experience integration champion, you're going to help us recruit. And so in New Hampshire now, anyone working with families, they know they are recruiters. They know they're closing a case, they're talking to parents, and they're saying, hey, as well as young people, there is a program. You can be a leader. You can be a partner in transforming the system. You have a space where you can come, meet others, find healing, find community, build community. And we have lots of family leaders that actually help also with the recruitment. And so to me, that's where we kind of really need to go as a field.
I love that, Gerald. I mean, so many people are impacted by the child welfare system, whether directly or indirectly. And the work that you do to empower them to be like, hey, take back some of that power that may have been stripped from you or you felt was stripped from you, because we meet these people, these families, these individuals at a point of crisis, right? That's unfortunately the way we kind of get their attention, or they come to our attention. And so we do strip them of that dignity. So I really appreciate the fact that you're like, no, let's empower every single person who walks through our doors to make change, to be that change agent in this system that tries to take away a lot from them as human beings. And Eddie, I want to bring you in here because, you do a lot of work in this space around, how can we get, those family leaders, those staff, that agency, right? How do they begin to create that level of change? What are some of those first steps that they would really need to do?
So identifying the parents that have that lived experience, that have that voice that needs to be shared. I was identified as, someone with a story that needed to be told, that needed to be shared. And I actually, found some really, my story was important to share. Like, people needed to hear about the reason why engaging dads is important. Some of the mistakes that may have been made, why those shouldn't be made again. Like I share because like what happened to me, I don't want to happen to another parent. And I want to help improve the quality of our engagements and make sure that when it's safe to include a dad, that we do so. But identifying those champions is very important. And honestly, it could be almost any parent, whether they had a good experience or a bad experience. All their stories, their voices matter. And just hearing from them, knowing how they felt at the time, knowing what we did right, knowing what we did wrong is important. And inviting them to the table, giving them that seat, keeping it there and not taking it away is very important. And it's part of our framework. We make sure that we have compensation for parents that do want to come in, that there's incentive to coming in and sharing their voices, that we value them, seeing that, hey, we understand it takes time and it can be a hardship, but come in and, we have a seat for you to come and share, because we want to, as an agency, show that we recognize that we have work to do. There's always improvements that need to be made, and having someone that can handle the recruitment. We have a family consultant, a specialist that, takes the names from all the referrals that we get. We've made it policy, like after cases close, to make sure that, these parents understand, hey, we have this program called our Parent Partner Program. You're invited to participate. Your voice matters. Your experience matters. So please connect. There are benefits to it. But one of the biggest benefits is that healing component, where people can say, wow, it felt good to get that off my chest, to talk about how I felt. And now I can go on that path to healing. I know for myself, for many years, I didn't acknowledge that I was hurt. And how can you heal if you don't acknowledge that you're hurt? So once I acknowledged that, all the trauma that I had, I was able to start that path towards healing, which a lot of our parents, believe it or not, can benefit from.
Eddie, I think you said something that I think we're all vibing with here is we have a lot of work to do, and there's always going to be work to do. And this intentionality of like bringing everybody to the table to say, you all have a role to play, but we also got to heal, right? I mean, I think we're all familiar with the notion, hurt people hurt people. And we are in a business of trying to care for people. So if we don't do that intentional level of healing and saying, we honor that frustration that you might have, we honor that anger, that scared, that sadness, right? We honor that. But together we are going to work through that, because that is how we're going to start the transformative change that we know is capable and we're all wanting to get to. So I really appreciate that as we talked about meaningful engagement, how important that is and how we always need to be doing that work and how we need to be doing it better.
Now that you've had an opportunity to listen to this discussion, consider bringing your team together to discuss how the information you heard might help support your jurisdiction's efforts towards creating authentic partnerships. Take some time to review the Fallout videos and additional resources to learn more about family empowerment and engagement.